Mujahideen al-Khalq, or MEK, is an Iranian terrorist organization that is according to the State Department. Despite MEK's facilitation in multiple terrorist activities over the past couple decades, including assassinating U.S. military personnel in Tehran, participating in U.S.-Iran hostage scenario, and working with Saddam Hussein, there is currently a massive lobbying campaign to the State Department to remove them from the list.
MEK is Iran's democratic opposition, working for a nuclear-free Iran founded on human rights. Unjustly listed a terrorist group, MEK is the victim of violence by the radical regime in Iran and their Iraqi allies. Europe has delisted MEK. And in 2010, a U.S. court ordered a review. Iranians, U.S. lawmakers, and former senior officials demand delisting. Secretary Clinton, for democracy and freedom in Iran, delist MEK.
Now, the MEK fiercely opposes the current regime in Iran, which coincides, of course, with American interests in the region. So does the U.S. only deem terrorists to those who are working against its goals in the Middle East? To break it down, I'm joined in studio by Jamal Abdi, Policy Director at the National Iranian American Council. Jamal, thanks for joining me. So as Policy Director for this council, do you consider the MEK to be a terrorist organization?
I know the history of the MEK. I know what they have been alleged to have conducted even in recent years as far as conducting terrorist attacks inside of Iran to assassinate nuclear scientists. But at the end of the day, it's not up to me. I don't have access to the classified information. That's up to the State Department. And what we have right now is this political campaign to pressure the State Department, not based on the evidence, not based on these allegations, not based on what's classified or unclassified, but based purely on the political factors and this big money campaign to remove them from that list. And I think that, regardless of where you sit on this debate, that is a major problem, to have a terrorist group actively pressuring the U.S. government inside of the U.S. to have itself removed from the terrorist list.
It does seem like whoever we deem as terrorists or not terrorists, it happens to fall in line with, of course, U.S. hegemonic interests in the Arab world at this point. So what do you think the motives are for this retraction of them on the list? Well,
the State Department hasn't made its decision yet, but I do fear that the motive will ultimately be a political motive. And the fact that you have not just Rudy Giuliani or John Bolton, who every other week is calling for military action against Iran, but you also have folks on the other side of the aisle. You have Howard Dean and Ed Rendell, Democrats. Some of them are supposedly progressive, also advocating for this group. And the reason that they're advocating for them, there are many different sort of motivating factors. For some, it's to ratchet up military pressure on Iran, and to ratchet up the possibility that there will be military action and a potential war with Iran. For other folks, it's simply a matter of they have been duped by this organization into believing that it's a legitimately democratic group, when the reality is it's not a democratic organization. It's a cult that has a base in Iraq where its members are actually held hostage. It has no support within Iran. And it has been cited as conducting numerous human rights abuses against its own supporters. And then you have a third group who's just in it for the money. And I think that those factors have all combined into creating this massive push that hopefully the State Department can withstand, but we'll see if they are able to prevent a politicized decision and actually make a decision based on the merits of the case.
You mentioned a couple people who have been paid tens of thousands of dollars to actually speak on behalf of the MEK. I wanted to show our viewers a full screen really quickly of mentioning a couple people that you did. Newt Gingrich, Rudy Giuliani, Mr. 9/11, the whole terrorist. Yeah, pretty much the guy who ran on 9/11 for his whole campaign against terrorism, and here he is, speaking on behalf of the MEK. You have Howard Dean, John Bolton, who you mentioned. Mitt Romney's foreign policy advisor. I mean, it's just amazing, hypocrisy, I guess. Or do you find any hypocrisy?
There are several advisors to Mitt Romney who have been paid to advocate for this group, which I think, Mitt Romney was actually asked on the campaign trail in some meeting in, I think in Iowa or New Hampshire, was asked about the group, and he confessed that he didn't have any idea who they were, and yet Mitchell Reese, John Bolton, two of his top advisors, have both advocated for the group. You mentioned Rudy Giuliani, the mayor of 9/11. Well, MEK actually praised the attacks of 9/11 at the camp in Iraq. They showed footage of it. There's reports that they said, wait till America sees what we have to offer. We need to be organizing on the level of Al-Qaeda. Even today, the U.S., one of the folks at the State Department who are handling the relocation of the MEK, because they're now based in Iraq, and we're basically trying to figure out a way to get them out of there without there being some sort of clash between them and the Iraqis. They did a press conference, and he said this is one of the few groups who has actually planned terrorist attacks on U.S. soil. So we can't be working with this group. It's clear that there's a problem here, and that they're working with no oversight by the authorities who are supposed to be preventing terrorist groups from being able to organize in the United States.
It really does raise the question of, the underlying premise of this whole war on terror that we seem to be fighting globally. I mean, when you hear things like this, that the MEK was actually facilitating or speaking, praising the attacks of 9/11, and then you have us going around doing all these terrorist activities, and then you have, the U.S. doesn't recognize Hamas, the democratically elected leadership of Palestine, and at the same time Russia does. It just seems like the war on terror as a whole is very subjective. What is terror really? Is terror dropping drones, bombs on people, or is it just low-level suicide bombing? I mean, just the whole concept is just an interesting one to take on. What do you think about that?
I think a lot of the advocates for the MEK would argue that, first they would say, and what they've been saying is the MEK renounced terror. Then it came out that administration officials acknowledged that the MEK was actually working with Mossad, the Israeli intelligence, to conduct these assassinations inside of Iran. Driving up to cars and sticking bombs on them to kill scientists and officials associated with the Iranian nuclear program. A lot of what these folks who support the group would say is, okay, well, if they haven't renounced terror, the types of activities they're conducting are actually freedom fighter activities. So they're the good kind of terrorists. They're fighting the Iranian regime, and so the enemy of our enemy is our friend. But the problem with this is, it's beyond just the dismissing sort of the values that are supposed to inform the way that the U.S. conducts its foreign policy. The lack of strategic foresight on this, and what we're really doing here is we're saying it's either a choice between the MEK or the Iranian regime. And we're leaving out the fact that the people in Iran don't support this group. The people in Iran actually embraced a nonviolent, peaceful democratic movement back in 2009. And for the U.S. to be lining up behind a group like the MEK that is despised in Iran because of its, fighting alongside Saddam Hussein, because of its terrorist attacks, we're throwing the people of Iran under the bus. And we're throwing our long-term strategic interests under the bus, because we're going to be stuck with this group that has no credibility and really is not working towards any kind of aim, as far as Iran is concerned, that I think anybody wants to see achieved.
Facilitating, fighting the war on terror by facilitating terrorism in our own right. And Newt Gingrich, actually, during his speech, we wanted to play a quick clip of him speaking to the MEK about how it's our moral obligation to do this.
We bear a moral responsibility. We gave a commitment as the United States. People believed in us. People protected us. Our officers who were there have told the truth again and again. And I believe the United States Congress should overrule the State Department and should insist in our intervening.
So really, are we just using these groups to just go after our goal? Ahmadinejad obviously isn't working in line with the interests of the U.S. And are we just, is it really our moral obligation to be doing the things that they're doing?
No, it's our moral obligation to support peaceful, support the Iranian people deciding their own future and deciding their own aspirations, and not siding with a group that wants to impose its own form of democracy on Iran. However quixotic this vision may be that MEK is somehow going to take over Iran. But really, we're throwing those values under the bus. We're throwing the Iranian people under the bus. And I think, Newt Gingrich was quite taken with this group. He actually, he went to France, and there's video of him bowing to Maryam Rajavi, who is the leader of the group, who is considered by the U.S. government a terrorist, bowed to her and then criticized the U.S. government on French soil, which Newt Gingrich himself was criticizing President Obama for going overseas and supposedly bowing to foreign leaders, and then he himself is taking money to bow to terrorist leaders. So I think that any sort of moral credibility or consistency is probably lost when you have examples like this coming from officials like Newt Gingrich.
And he also compared them to, George Washington during the American Revolution. And it is interesting that one of the instances that we cite them as terrorists is working with Saddam Hussein, when obviously, infamously, we did as well. That
George Bush cited them when we went into Iraq. He cited MEK's work with Saddam Hussein as one of the examples of Saddam supporting terrorists.
Goes circular logic there. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank
that
you.
was Jamal Abdi, Policy Director for the National Iranian American Council.